Nation. I'm Bear with BearIndependent.com. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe. You're going to need this information for what's coming. If you're not new here, go ahead and share this out to people who need to see it, because we need to get as many people in the family as we can, get as many people prepared as we can, because the world is getting dumber and dumber every day. However, the Supreme Court of the United States of America, I will not say has restored my hope in humanity, because they haven't. But I'm pleased with their actions here lately. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I want to issue an asterisk or a caveat. I do not expect every one of you to think or feel or believe the same way that I do, but you will respect me for my beliefs, especially at my channel. And today is going to be one of those days that is more spiritual, if you will, than political, given the nature of what we're going to discuss. And if that's a deal breaker for you, then this is probably not the live stream for you to watch. We are going to be talking about Roe versus Wade this morning, and the fallout from that. And I think that's super important. Good morning to everybody in the chat. A brother posited a question this past week while I was in North Dakota training, and he said, what if the only people you ever dealt with, the only people you ever trained were brothers and sisters? How different would your life look? And I've been thinking a lot about that since then. It struck a chord, hit a nerve. That's a big part of what I'm trying to do here, is empower you, my brothers and sisters out there, to be able to withstand what is coming. And if we're going to do that, if we're going to deal with one another as a brother and a sister, we've got to observe the two prime directives, right? Love the Lord our God with everything we've got, and love our neighbor as ourself. On this hangs all the Torah and the prophets, says Mashiach, Matthew chapter 18. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and talk about Roe v. Wade. Roe versus Wade has officially been overturned by the Supreme Court in a 5-4 decision. As forewarned here at Bear Independent, social unrest has begun blooming across the country in the wake of the announcement. Hours after the Supreme Court decision, a fire broke out at a pregnancy center in Longmont, Colorado, and threatening messages and graffiti were found in the building during an ongoing arson investigation, including a message that said, quote, "If abortions aren't safe, neither are you," end quote. Vandals spray painted a very similar, quote, "If abortions aren't safe, you're not either," end quote, on the Vermont State House after the decision. On the Vermont State House after the decision, and broke 7 windows. So far, Jane's Revenge, a militant extremist pro-abortion rights group, has claimed responsibility for over 12 incidents of vandalism and violence at pro-life crisis pregnancy centers and churches nationwide, the most recent of which was when a pro-life pregnancy resource center in Gresham, Oregon was set aflame on Friday. The same organization has posted flyers online and in Washington, D.C., attempting to instigate rioting in a, quote, night of rage. At the Arizona Capitol, lawmakers huddled in the basement as SWAT members fired tear gas to disperse the hundreds of protesters gathered around the building, some of whom were beginning to strike the windows. Now, on the one hand, and on the other hand, let's talk about this. Operationally, what are we looking at here? So, Jane's Revenge, militant leftists, bad guys, per my worldview. I don't know who you are, but for me, bad guys. Clearly intent on doing harm. Their intent, they are breaking windows with people inside of buildings. They're lighting things on fire. One could say they've established a pattern of behavior at this point, that if you were inside of that building and they set it on fire, That's now not just arson, that's murder. Because they're upset at this Roe v. Wade decision, which, by the way, does not make abortions illegal. It simply states that there is no constitutional precedent for a woman to have access to abortions, which means that now, per the 10th Amendment, that decision is made at the state level, not the federal level, which I believe abortions are not good anyway. We shouldn't be condoning that type of behavior, but the federal government is saying they don't have a purview over that type of behavior. And so that's a states' rights issue, and I agree with that. I also want to point out, I know and love people who have had abortions. It doesn't make you a terrible human being. It means you made a mistake. And like all of us, myself included, who have made mistakes, that does not mean that you are incapable of being redeemed by the blood of the Son and coming back into the family and finding your way back to the Most High, back to the Father. So you need to repent of that. You need to teshuvah. You need to turn from your wicked ways. You need to confess to the Creator of the universe your mistake. And then you need to make an agreement, a covenant with Him that you will not do that again. That's teshuvah. That's biblical repentance. It's not just saying it with your mouth. It's meaning it with your heart and then doing it with your hands. Or not doing it with your hands, whatever that might be. And so I have no love for the action of abortion. I have no love for abortion doctors. As somebody who has lost as many children during pregnancy as I currently have, I am passionate about protecting our young people. And the whole issue hits me right in the feels. And so I don't condone abortion, but I also love people who have had abortions because they didn't know better. They didn't perceive that they had any options, right? Now, if you begin to use abortion as birth control, post-conception birth control, that to me is unacceptable. Now you know better. But for those that didn't, it's not our jobs to make them feel like such pieces of shit that they run away from the Creator of the universe. It's our job to love them and to have compassion for them and to explain to them where they went wrong so that they don't do it again. Like any other sin, like any other transgression of the law. What is sin? 1 John 3 verse 4. Sin is transgression of the law. Like any other transgression, you would pull that person aside and have a conversation with them. And if that conversation didn't work, you would go with 2 or 3 witnesses, per the book of Matthew and the teaching of Messiah and the Torah. Imagine that. And have a conversation. And now if they don't receive you, you take it to the whole assembly and have a conversation. Master, master, how many times shall I forgive my brother as he sins against me? 7 times? No. Truly I say to you, 70 times 7 times. If there's true repentance there, if there's true teshuvah there, we're to forgive those people while not condoning the actions. And so I think there's a lot of push-pull there morally. So I don't support a woman's right to abortion. I think it violates the first command in the Bible, be fruitful and multiply. And I'm not a fan of violating the Father's commands. I also want to point out, for all the people that like to tell me that I'm anti-militia, I think that's a lack of understanding for me. I'm anti-untrained, unorganized, coffee talk and woodland camo, and we're going to fight the government, but we don't have zeroed rifles militias. I think what we're seeing right now with Jane's Revenge is a beautiful opportunity for people that have a modicum of coordination and logistics to protect these pregnancy centers and these churches. Find the local church in your area. Find the local pregnancy center in your area and reach out to them and offer your services for security. And now this means now you need to do this. You need, at a minimum, a network of people with communications and logistics and a QRF or a reserve. And you need to put people on these buildings 24/7, 365 to be the eyes and ears, because the police officers don't show up in time. The firefighters don't show up in time to prevent it. They show up after the fact. So you need proactive security, not reactive security. And I think this is a great opportunity for communities to support their local churches and their pregnancy centers, and to build rapport in the community and to network. I think it's a great opportunity, and so I would strongly recommend that. If there's potential Jane's Revenge targets in your area, why don't you go harden those targets up? Yeah, it's about all I can say on that on open channels on the internet, but why don't you go harden those targets up? The cost-benefit analysis, it's a huge benefit at very little cost. And it's good training for you and your guys or girls or whoever. Go harden those targets up. Make it a little bit more difficult for Jane's Revenge to do what they're doing. And your first line of defense doesn't need to be this, a spotlight. Let's start with a spotlight. Light them up. Because evil prefers darkness, and the light shines into the darkness, and the darkness comprehendeth it not. How will this affect the political landscape of the U.S.? Naturally, this is expected to affect the midterm elections due to a predicted surge in concerned Democrat and independent voters. In President Biden's, or more likely one of his speechwriters' words, quote, "We must elect more senators and representatives who will codify a woman's right to choose in federal law once again. Elect more state leaders to protect this right at the local level," end quote. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that the agenda of the radical left has disenfranchised a lot of the good Democrats out there. I've had a lot of conversation with people who are not like me and not from here, because I go to a lot of places. And what I've found, whether it's the ghettos of Dallas or Seattle or pick your poison, Tulsa, even Tulsa, Oklahoma, we may disagree on a lot of things. What we agree on is that something needs to be done, generally speaking. What we tend to disagree on is how to get it done. Our more liberal friends generally think that it's the government's job to do that. And our more conservative friends generally think that, no, it's the individual's job to do that. And then the conversation, the arguments ensue back and forth and back and forth. But even those that I know are Democrats, that I know are liberals, and by the way, conservatives, get off your high horse. Our conservative representation sucks shit. They're terrible. So don't brag. They're not very good. Our guys. I say our guys. I'm an independent. I digress. The far left agenda of the Democrats is alienating a lot of the center left Democrats. I don't think you're going to see a bunch of radicals elected in the midterms. I'm not entirely sure how many people, air quote, are going to be elected, air quote, in the midterms anyway. The idea that we have free and fair elections, I think, went away with our last presidential election. So it's interesting to me how many people now are super stoked about the midterm elections, as if they couldn't be compromised and or corrupted. So, and you heard it here first. Yeah, Bear said, no, I've been saying this for years. I have no hope of free and fair elections in this country anymore, which is a Rome is burning indicator. But I don't think that Biden is correct. I don't think we're going to see a resurgence of far left political operatives in this country. I think we're trending more in the conservative direction because of the actions of the far left. That being said, conservatives, again, get off your high horse. And if you have somebody, much like somebody who's had an abortion per se, if you've had somebody who was far left and is now moving center left, maybe then to center, and then maybe to center right, screaming, "I told you so," and you're such an asshole because you voted for this person and that person and that person, isn't going to help them. It's not going to help you either. You need to look more for points of alignment, more for points of critical agreement than for points of contention. Because what's the second prime directive? Love your neighbor as yourself. And if you're not actively trying to do that, you're not actively following your Messiah. Now, if your neighbor is Jane's Revenge and they're trying to break your windows and throw Molotov cocktails in your place, you can love them at 3,200 foot per second with 77 grain OTM. Well, 77 grain goes a little bit slower than that, but 55 grain, 62 grain, get the job done. You catch my point here? There's biblical precedent for this as well. Who is my neighbor? Those who are walking with you in this faith. And if you are a person of faith, your political ideology should be less important to you than your theology and your spirituality. It should be less important to you how you serve man than how you serve the creator of the universe, how you come back into his presence by the blood of his son, how you perform his daily tasks while upholding the two prime directives. Love the Lord your God with everything you've got, Deuteronomy 6:5, and love your neighbor as yourself, Leviticus 19, verse 18. That's what you should be concerned about. If somebody's not being neighborly, the inverse of thou shalt not murder is, if you're trying to murder me, thou shalt not murder. And as a dear friend of mine likes to say, everybody's sorry on their way to the rock pile. Sometimes you just got to walk somebody to the rock pile. So this is called wisdom and discernment. And it's a gift of the Spirit. And I would implore you to beg the Father to deliver his Spirit unto you for wisdom and discernment. Back to the brief. Additionally, the trend started in 2020 of, quote, voting with one's feet, end quote. It's still happening. People are moving purely based off of political policies. Some are fleeing California because of the liberal policies, and some are fleeing Texas because of the conservative policies, and so forth. Man, if you're leaving Texas because of politics, you're going to hate Oklahoma. Do not come here. Texas looks like, when you're in Oklahoma, Texas looks like California. But I understand. If you've been trapped in New York and you moved to Texas, Texas is the greatest place on the face of the earth. I get it. Everything's relative, right? Senator Josh Hawley told reporters, quote, I would predict that the effect is going to be that more and more red states are going to become more red. Purple states are going to become red. And blue states are going to get a lot bluer. Ultimately, end quote. Ultimately, this all means that the invisible divide between countrymen is deepening more and more, and it's slowly becoming not just ideological, but somewhat geographical as well. This is a balkanization indicator. We'll talk about that in a moment. The BBC wrote, quote, a nation sharply split over the morality and legality of abortion, where citizens are divided by geography, culture, and political ideology, is a recipe for political acrimony, the kind of which the U.S. hasn't seen since the days before the Civil War, end quote. And of course, if you're on Patreon, you've got the written brief and the relevant links to do your own homework. And if you're not on Patreon, you don't. It's $5 a month. There's a link in the description on every video. Come find us there. And there's 2,500 exclusive pieces of content that live there that'll never see the light of day on YouTube. That's where the real stuff is. The real stuff, the real deep, good stuff is on Patreon. So, political acrimony, Balkanization, geographical separation, mimicking ideological separation. We've talked about this at great lengths. We've talked about Balkanization, as have many other people. Bear, do you think it's possible? I don't think it's possible, just possible. I think it's likely. I think that's likely to happen, especially as the federal government continues to lose legitimacy, which means it's striving more and more to maintain its authority, aka becoming more authoritarian. People will look to their states, as they should, first and foremost, as the source of political authority and legitimacy in their area than the federal government. And so more and more states are, nature abhors a vacuum. As the federal government pulls back, the state governments are going to step in. And state governments are more representative of their constituency than the federal government is, which means, hopefully, state governments being more representative of their constituency than the federal government, that you're going to see more and more of the ideological separation between states occurring, because by and large, speaking in gross generalities, the people of Texas and Oklahoma and Louisiana are far different than the people of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, okay? Ideologically, politically, far different. Not as far apart as you would think, though, because you also have micro regions, right? Because like upstate New York is way different than downstate New York. Northern California is way different than Southern California, etc., right? You know, I tell people I grew up in upstate New York and they look at me funny because, you know, we had cows and we had a pig named Elvis, and we had chickens, and we had horses, and woods and hay fields and four-wheelers and four-wheel drive pickup trucks and shotguns in our trucks, and, you know, drank beer on dirt roads. And they're like, in New York? Yes, the whole state is not made of concrete. Yeah, highly agricultural. Upstate New York is highly agricultural. AKA, there be rednecks there. And I was one. So there's these micro regions, even amongst states, right? And as always, where you see high population density areas is where you tend to see more liberal theology, liberal ideology. And I think it's because when there's fewer people, my expectation out here is not that the government's going to take care of me. I don't expect a fire truck to show up here if my barn catches on fire. It would be a miracle if it did. I do not expect at all that the sheriff's department, because we live in the county, there's no town near us, the sheriff's department is never going to arrive in time for me to solve a problem. I will have solved it 10 times over by the time they get here. It's just a fact. And it's not the sheriff's department's fault. It's a math problem. It's geography. There's only so many of them, and it's a big old county, and there's lots of miles in between them and wherever the problems are. It's a math problem. It's not their fault. It's a math problem. So I don't have an expectation of the government taking care of me out here. There's no public transportation. Hell, they barely fixed the roads. And I'm cool with that because my taxes are low. Versus a more populated area where people live roof upon roof, house upon house, where they have to have buses and trains to get around because they can't own cars, because there's no place to park the cars and there's no place to buy gas and blah, 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 right? They have to have law enforcement officers because they've disarmed themselves, right? There's multiple fire stations in every district because the population density is so high. And so ideologically, people become more liberal with, generally speaking, with more of a bent towards the government will take care of us, therefore it needs more authority in populated areas, versus people being more conservative out in the country, more rural areas, because we know it's not possible for them to take care of us. When the tax collector can't the tax assessor can't find your house, you live in the right place. And you're not trying to dodge him. It's just that rural. You know what I mean? That's cool. And so there's a difference in ideology there. And that's a contributing factor that leads to balkanization. And I think balkanization is likely to occur. Not now, not tomorrow, not next week. There's going to, in my mind, a lot of accelerators will be required in between now and balkanization. The federal government is going to have to truly lose its legitimacy in order for the states to do the cost-benefit analysis, to pull back, to quit participating in the federal system and create their own regional system, aka balkanization. And we're not there yet. However, we're certainly headed in that direction. So all that being said, hallelujah, praise the Most High with this Roe versus Wade decision. I'm just thankful. And as you know, I'm sure every single one of you is also tracking on our buddy Clarence Thomas and the 6-3 decision on concealed carry and your right to carry a firearm outside of your home. Good to go. Digging it. And again, I guess lastly, I would reiterate, if you live in an area where you're concerned about these Jane's Revenge people, do something about it. And what I mean by that is contact the potential targets in your area and take your prepper group, your MAG, your team, your tribe, your community watch, your whatever, and go pull security for that place. Great training opportunity. If you're wondering about the legalities there, get in an email from those people, because that's essentially written permission. Get in an email from whoever it is you're protecting, their approval for you to be there. Have your CCW, or if you live in a constitutional carry state, you're good to go. Cool. And don't start no stuff. Some stuff starts and you're in fear for your life, you can end it legally, but don't start no stuff. But a couple of big flashlights is a great way to deter people. The light shines into the darkness, and the darkness comprehendeth it not. Incidentally, coincidentally. Now, that's the brief. If you're one of those people that jumps off when it's time to talk about how to support the show, this is your invitation to beat feet, to skedaddle, get out of here. Have a blessed day. RefugeMedical.com. Birthing buckets. The what? If you're unaware, preppers tend to put things in buckets. Beans and rice and corn and wheat and bullets and everything else. And so we started, Refuge Medical is one of my companies, and we started a while ago putting wound care stuff in buckets. And it's super cool. You just, all the gauze, tape, gloves, and disinfectant one needs to treat a wound for 30 to 60 days, boom, in a bucket, prepped, ready to go. Take it out of the box, throw it on the shelf, put it in the basement, whatever. Ready to go. Handled. And so, spinning off of the wound care bucket, we have the birthing bucket and the postpartum bucket. Meaning, if somebody is pregnant or could become pregnant during SHTF, which I would submit we're in the midst of, we're there. It's just a slow, steady decline, not a huge catastrophe yet. And there's no access to services. There's no hospital for the person to have this baby at. We came up with the birthing bucket and the postpartum bucket, and they go hand in hand. They're like love and marriage. You can't have one without the other. Well, anyway, all that to say, at RefugeMedical.com right now, if you use promo code BIRTH, B-I-R-T-H, BIRTH, you get 15% off the birthing bucket and the postpartum bucket. So go there, check that out. That's at RefugeMedical.com. There's a link in the description always. All of our kits are handmade, made in America, guaranteed forever. If you can find a better first aid kit, I'll buy it from you. They don't exist. That's why we started our company. 43 lives saved to date. It's actually 44, but I'm not ready to release the details on 44 yet. Praise Yah. Found out about that this past Friday. So, that's RefugeMedical.com. Refuge training. If you don't know anything about trauma medicine, you need to come to class. If you are currently breathing air and there is blood inside your body, you need the Refuge Responder 1 class. It teaches you the mindset and methodology to go from an innocent bystander to a first responder. You need that stuff. It's refugetraining.com. There's also a tab at refugemedical.com. If you click training, it'll take you over there. There are currently classes in Dallas, Waco, Philadelphia, and Tell City, Indiana. More classes are coming soon for the Pacific Northwestern tour. When that is up, I will give you the specifics on that. And then if you're interested in a private class, we do several private classes per year. You can email sales@refugetraining.com. That's it. Thank you all for supporting Grindstone Ministries. We've got 7 individuals in our care currently. Grindstone and Caleb House. Caleb House is our restoration facility for juvenile human trafficking survivors. We've got an upcoming Grindstone construction project to assist an adult rehabilitation center. They need some stuff done, so we're going to be working with them here in the next few weeks to help them with that. We have ongoing construction at the Caleb House site. Well, it's site prep. Construction will begin this fall. So we're doing site prep, roads and drainage and utilities and lions and tigers and bears, oh my. We've got that going on at the site at Caleb House, and construction going on with Grindstone, and just couldn't do it without y'all. Not enough hours in the day, but praise y'all, we are super blessed and we're covered in prayer, and everything we need, we get. So thank you for supporting us with that. I appreciate y'all. Y'all have a blessed day. And take the time to say thank you to the Creator for the blessings He has poured out upon you. Rejoice in your small beginnings. None of this is guaranteed. None of it. So how about you say thanks to Dad today? Because he is a loving Father who pours out blessings on his children. And we are undeserving of that. Y'all have a blessed day. Shalom.